What is GDP? What is that percentage which they show in the GDP data? How do they say that 6% GDP is grown? What is the 6%? On what basis they tell that? In this video, I will try to explain you what is this concept GDP, and I will also cover what is the methods of calculating GDP, and I will also cover what is the two types of GDP, that is the real GDP and nominal GDP, how it is expressed in this percentage, what is that percentage, from where they get that percentage, how that is expressed. I will make it very simple and very easier for you to understand the concept of GDP. There are many videos in YouTube, but none of them will give you the point to point, that is direct answer about GDP. Everything will be in bookish way, bookish knowledge. I will give you the real and exact meaning of GDP in very simple terms, so that even a layman can understand, anyone can understand. So I will cover all this, that is almost everything about GDP, what is required for your knowledge. So let's start with GDP, meaning of the GDP. The expansion, all of you know, that is the gross domestic product. What is this? The meaning of this, it is the capacity of the economy. It is the capacity of the economy of a country during a specified period of time. I repeat, it is the capacity of the economy during a specified period of time, which is calculated during a specified period of the time. That is, either it is 1 year, you can calculate for quarter wise, that is 3 months once, you can calculate even for monthly. In practical, the calculation of GDP is a continuous work, and it is done every day. Calculation happens almost every day. The background process keeps on going on. So this is the meaning of the GDP. It is the total capacity of the country's economy. Next, we will go, what are the types of the calculation of GDP. I will elaborate more about the meaning of GDP. After telling everything, you will be able to understand the meaning in a right way. So what are the types of calculating GDP? There are three methods to calculate GDP. One is income method, another is expenditure method, and one more is the production method or value added method. And these three methods normally and usually countries use expenditure method. That is the total money spent in a country, through which we calculate the total capacity of the economy. So take the example of India. How is the GDP calculated? You remembered the word GDP. G for, you forget the expansion. I am giving you the shortcut to remember the real meaning of GDP. G for government, D for domestic, P for public. So whatever money is spent, that is expenditure of the government plus domestic plus public, is the value of GDP. That's it, very simple. Whatever expenditure is incurred by the government for paying salaries, for making roads, infrastructures, public amenities, paying salaries to minister, everything is included, whatever money is spent by the government. Then comes domestic, that is the companies, small companies, medium companies, big companies, everything. All those domestic companies which are in India, whatever money they spent for production, for paying salaries, for everything, whatever money is spent, that total amount, add the total money spent by the general public. Everyone is a consumer and everyone will spend for a living. So their total expenditure, when you add up all these three expenditure, that is expenditure of government, private companies and corporations, and the expenditures incurred by the general public, when you add these all, it gives you the value of the GDP. This is the expenditure method of calculation of the GDP. So whatever money is spent during a year, specified year, for example 2019, this is the value of the GDP. For example, it can be 100 lakhs. It can be 100 lakhs. Right now the during the 2019, the GDP was around $3.2 trillion for India. So this is the way of calculating the GDP through expenditure method. Usually most of the countries follow expenditure method of calculating GDP. There are other two methods also. Now you have understood what is this GDP and how it gives the picture of the economy, because you are calculating the total capacity of the economy. So whatever money they are able to spend, only when you earn you are able to spend that much money. And there are various other complex calculations which take place, because you might be thinking how they are able to understand. See, each and every company, small company, big company, everything which is in the economy, they submit their annual returns, various other forms to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and there are GST organization. All the data collection happens without your knowledge. Even the public data collection happens without your knowledge, because whatever is produced is only bought by the public. So don't think much about how the data is collected. That is the duty of the government. They will do it. It is calculated by the National Statistical Organization of India. And now we will move on to what is this real GDP and nominal GDP. I already told you there are two types of GDP. One is the real GDP, another is the nominal GDP. Why there are two types? What was the necessity of reporting it in two ways, real GDP and nominal GDP? Okay, first you will understand what is real GDP and what is nominal GDP. Then I will tell you why it is important to report in these two types. First, let's go for a real GDP. Real GDP, in calculation of real GDP, a year is fixed. That year is called base year. A base year is fixed. For example, you are starting to calculate the GDP from 2011. Take that year as base year. So in the year 2011, you have, for example, 100 lakhs. You have calculated GDP, your GDP is 100 lakhs for 2011. You have fixed 2011 as the base year. Now you move on to 2012. Now you will understand what is that percentage, how they express it. In 2012, again you calculate the GDP. Say, for example, in 2012, the GDP is 105 lakhs. So how much growth is there in the GDP? How do you say that percentage? From 100 lakhs, it has gone to 105 lakhs. Base year is 2011. So there is an increase of 5%, 100 lakhs to 105 lakhs in the next year. So this way they say 5% GDP growth. The GDP has grown 5%. And so in real GDP, you have fixed the base year. Remember this. Now I will go for nominal GDP. Then I will come again back to real GDP to make you understand. What is nominal GDP? Nominal GDP is actual calculation of GDP without taking consideration of the base year. For example, you are calculating the GDP of 2019. You calculate the GDP as it is based on what is the current market prices, what is the money spent. You calculate the GDP. For example, 2019 or 2020, you are calculating GDP and your reporting is it. This is called nominal GDP. How will you compare the growth? If it is 2000, you are calculating for 2020 based on 2019, you can compare and you can see this much percentage it has grown. This can be possible through nominal GDP. Now, why there is a necessity for, what is the difference between this real GDP and nominal GDP? Why there is a necessity of two things? You might be thinking both are same. Both are not same. In real GDP, you have fixed the base year 2011. Then you calculate for 2012. When you go for 2013, 2014, 2015 or any year, you will calculate not from the previous year but from the base year. In 2011, you have fixed 2011 as base year and you are calculating for 2015. Then also you are comparing with the 2011 year only. Why is that done? Because of the cost of inflation. To buy a same product after 10 years, it will cost you more. Why? Because the value of the money goes down, inflation is there. That is why real GDP is there, to show the real picture, removing the inflation cost. Inflation is there, so to remove inflation and see what is the real picture. In 2000, for example, take 2011 and you are moving in 2015. In 2011 the total GDP was 100 lakhs. In 2015 the total GDP is for example 150 lakhs. Can you say there is a growth of 50%? Because 100 to 150? No, it is not right to say, because in 2015 prices would have gone much high, expenditure would have gone much high, so the value of money decreases, inflation increases. So to remove that inflation, 2011 is fixed. That year whatever the prices of the goods and services was there, based on that fixed price, all the GDP of further years are calculated to have an actual comparison, removing the inflation. That is why real GDP is there. In nominal GDP, inflation is not taken into consideration. Directly based on the current market prices, current year whatever was the money value, expenditure, it is calculated. So what is the GDP percentage you see in the news is the real GDP. It is taken into consideration after taking into account the inflation cost. So inflation is removed so that you can get the real GDP in actual. Even though you are in 2019, what if with same amount of money, what with the same inflation level in 2019 also you are there. From 2011 to 2019 we have come here also with the same level of inflation, then what will be your real growth? So to express that real GDP is there, whatever you see in the news is the real GDP which is shown to you. Nominal GDP will be higher because you are calculating based on the current price and current economic situation without taking into consideration inflation cost. So through this real GDP and nominal GDP, if you don't have the inflation level also, you can calculate what is the inflation. You have nominal GDP, you have real GDP. Real GDP will be less because it has taken into account the inflation cost. So if you divide the nominal GDP by the real GDP, you will get a percentage. That percentage will be your inflation percentage, because the difference between the current that is the nominal GDP and the real GDP will be the inflation. That is the only difference. So through real GDP and nominal GDP you can find the inflation level also. So this was the concept of real GDP, nominal GDP, and I already told you GDP is the total expenditure, that is the total capacity of the economy, whichever money they are able to circulate in the economy, that is spent in the economy for the development of the nation and for the living and running of the nation. That is the total GDP. So you would have now been cleared about the concept of GDP, methods of calculation of GDP, real GDP, nominal GDP, what is that percentage. In this percentage you can even compare with quarter to quarter, year to year, monthly. For example, you are comparing the percentage of GDP based on quarter to quarter. That is for the first quarter of 2020, that is January to March 2020, you calculate the total GDP of the nation. It is some amount. Now you have to compare this with the previous year. You will compare with January to March 2019, same quarter comparison for previous year. Or you can compare month wise, not by previous month but the same month in the preceding year. For example, I want to know the total GDP of March month of 2020. So I am comparing it with the total GDP of the same month in 2019, that is March 2019. You can do comparisons like this. You can do comparisons with quarter. You can do comparison within the same year, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. You can do year to year comparisons. Like this mini statistical analysis, data analysis of the GDP can be done. It is possible. So, and one more thing is that if I go more deep inside this GDP concept, it will keep on going, which I don't want, and it is not required for your knowledge. GDP, you understand what is GDP, that is enough. And GDP has relation with many other factors in the economy: unemployment, poverty, and per capita income, spending capacity, income, national income, everything. It has a connection with the GDP, which you can understand. Since you are able to understand, is the total economic capacity of the country. So it will have the relation with everything: unemployment, poverty, etc., etc., everything. And in upcoming more videos, I will try to take up other concepts of economy like national income, etc. So hope this video was informative for you and you have understood what is GDP and what is that percentage which is shown in the GDP, real GDP and nominal GDP, etc. Hope this was helpful for you. Thank you. Keep studying, keep learning.